Morning, everybody out there in Swuggaland. We have the Era of Andor that just started yesterday, which means that the Era of Anniversaries is completely over at this point. Now, what is relevant about that is when the Era of Anniversaries came out, we didn't really understand the system, and I don't think anybody really had rose tinted glasses on, but there was this new novelty to how eras interacted with players, which allowed a lot of people to stick around, push on, and move forward just to make sure that their sentiments made sense and they understood what was going on around them. So I want to take some time with this video to discuss eras and how the community temperature feels right now with the community, with content creators, with Discord, and things that CG has done right and things that CG has done wrong. I think that these are some of my community's favorite videos. It is time for disappointed Daddy Egnards. So the first thing that I want to do is talk about what CG has done right moving into the era of Andor. So, positive changes for the community that some people will notice, some people won't notice. But I at least appreciated the effort that were put into these changes. And the first thing that we're going to talk about here really is just the fact that there is a sim button on the marquee battles now. For free to play casual players, you might only be doing the first three tiers of this event. But it's still nice to know that instead of having to go in and do battles that were brain dead easy but did take up time, will now no longer take up that same amount of time. I do kind of wish there was a sim all button over here to sim all of the tiers that you can do, but beggars can't be choosers, and I really, really appreciate that. Secondly, when we talk about the era conversion, moving into this new era, I know players were nervous about this. We didn't get information beforehand. We really didn't need the information beforehand just because there wasn't anything any players could do at that point. But I know that there were some concerns, and it seems that I happened to receive about 4,000 tokens with everything that I had left over. But looking at Discord, players who spent less were looking at about 1,000 to 2,000 leftover currency for eras, and that's kind of nice. I know some people may have hoped for more, but I also was expecting a lot less. I personally expected that myself, I would be receiving somewhere around half of what I did receive, and I appreciate it. Now, there is obviously still a bug there, which is that Xeric materials did not convert over. And it's an interesting bug that CG has elected not to fix, but to let it play out and fix for the next era. But it's an interesting bug because I think that there are definitely players out there who might say, man, I really want the era currency. But for some of the soft whale players, this is actually a really, really positive change for them, since now those players are only going to have to soft whale on marquee 5 and 6 instead of having to full on whale, just because those Xeric materials that are in very low supply right now are going to be in high supply for those players. When we talk about the era itself, it was also really nice to kind of get a retrospective, which is no longer in my inbox. I think that it would have been cooler to have more information, maybe top scores for all of the bosses or team compositions that I used most often. But that's neither here nor there. It was great to see where all of my characters broke down and the amount of GP that I was adding. And for a guild at our level, we actually added, it looks like, about 7.5 to 8 million GP overall. which was kind of cool. So I want to give CG props for those things. However, overall, I just I'm really frustrated by this system. And I've said this a few times on Discord. I feel like a boomer who doesn't understand technology because I spent 40 years of my life learning the technologies around me, and then technology advanced so much. This game is now 10 years old, and for 8 of those years, pretty much all of the game systems were the same. And last year, with the era shift, we saw some changes, but the game worked the same no matter what. The game systems behind the eras still worked exactly the way they always did. And I don't want to say that everybody was happy, but those veteran players like myself, we understood what we were playing and we were happy to play the game that we were playing. With the era system, we are fundamentally altering how Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes works. And I think that a lot of us who have been playing for a very long time, we're very frustrated that we don't fully understand the system, or the system isn't the game that we signed up for so long ago. And the reason that I think that that is one big factor is that I am seeing the majority of the discontent within the community is from players who have been playing very long term. I know of at least 3 content creators in the last 24 hours who have completely walked away from the game. I know that Discord sentiment is that there are a lot of players who are thinking about walking away from the game at this point. But at the same time, there are a lot of newer players who have started in the last 2 years who don't have that same perspective, who are seemingly a lot happier than they have been in the past. Um, I can only talk from a veteran perspective. I cannot talk from the perspective of a player who has not been around as long. I cannot talk from the perspective of somebody who picked up this game last year, bought $200 worth of Lightspeed tokens, and their account is 7 million when it would have taken me uh, 4 years to get there. Okay, from the perspective of a veteran, right now in the game feels very bad, and there are a lot of problems. And I really wish, and I was really hoping that a lot of these problems would be addressed with Era of Andor. From a spending perspective, keeping in mind that I spent about 9 years as a casual spender, dropping $20 to $30 a month, sometimes less, sometimes more. I am now an accidental whale. I am whaling with somebody else's money. Um, Somebody who has way more money than I can ever fathom, who is um, allowing me to make these purchases on my account. Um, and it still doesn't feel good. Yesterday, I soft whaled on Clea. And in the past, if you wanted to soft whale on a character, and by soft whale, I mean that I take them high enough up that I can get 7 stars by the end of the event. In the past, if you wanted to soft whale on a character as a veteran, you would buy the episode pass. You would buy the number 1 pack, and you would buy the number 2 pack. So you would make 3 transactions. Okay, the number 3 pack didn't exist, or it did exist, but they were called the 2 and 3, not the 1, 2, and 3. So it didn't exist, but the name existed. You would make a grand total of 3 transactions, and you'd spend your money, and you'd know that you spent approximately $120, and you'd be okay with it, and you'd move on, and you get to mod your character and play with your character, enjoy the character that you were playing with, and look forward to using them in Conquest, TB, GAC, TW, whatever else. Yesterday, instead of that $120, in order to make this character usable. And you can see I can't click on leaderboard right now because there is a bug there. But in order to make this character usable, okay, so getting her to level 24, I had to spend, let's see, I had to spend $179 to get her here. And I had to do that over the course of 9 transactions. So not 3 transactions, but 9 transactions to get her usable. And on top of the transactions just feeling annoying, like this nuisance of having to go in, press the button, do the verification, go in, press the button, do the verification, blah, blah, blah. Beyond that annoyance of reminding me that I was spending all of this money, and keep in mind, it's not even my money. Beyond that annoyance, I also recognized that I was not really going to be able to use this character in any meaningful way. I went in, did my Coliseum. There wasn't very much strategy to the Coliseum at all. I was using summoned units, and there's some moves that I could use, some moves that I could not use, and the battles took all of 45 seconds. And then I was done. And I won't get to use her again until tomorrow, and I'll get to use her again for another 60 seconds tomorrow, and we'll kind of move on and on and on like that for a while. And it doesn't feel good. I've said this before. It feels like, going to Kmart 25 years ago to put a Nintendo 64 on layaway for your kid for Christmas and making payments over the course of 3 months until you can finally pick it up from the store in their back room. Players don't want that. Players want to play with their toys. They want to enjoy their toys. They want to feel like the majority of us are adults, and the majority of us have some degree of disposable income, and we recognize that we are spending that disposable income on a bunch of pixels to play a game and interact with the community, and we've rationalized that, and we're okay with that. But right now we feel like we can't do that, and right now we feel like we are just throwing money into the wind for nothing, and that is really frustrating. And detrimental to the game as a whole. And I want you to keep on that point because we're going to talk about that when we talk about Era of Anniversaries in a little bit. One of the other major disappointments I'm feeling right now is that there are no new bosses for Coliseum. I did not expect 4 new bosses. I honestly, truly expected we would get 1 new boss, and quite frankly, it should have been the first boss that we saw. Because when we started Coliseum 3 months ago, and we played it, and we realized there wasn't much substance in the first 4 to 8 weeks, and players were really frustrated with it. And then once we hit like Marquee 3 or 4, we started to realize, oh, there is a little bit of strategy. We're being thrown back to that square one, but without any new mechanics involved, without any new investments involved. I popped in, I saw that it was the Jotaz. I said, oh, okay, great. I have to not use buffs, and I have to hit this thing as hard as I can and do this again. It was disappointing. I think that if CG is going to continue on Coliseum, they really need to continue on the path of 1 new boss per era. And that doesn't mean go from 5 bosses to 6 bosses to 7 bosses in an era. 4 bosses, cycle 1 out. At least until we have 12 bosses, you can mix and match depending on the era. But this really did not feel great yesterday to play this game mode, knowing that I was backtracking from a game mode where there was some degree of strategy, and now going to where I'm using characters that are not that great to hit a boss for 0 damage, right? So that was definitely something yesterday that I found to be incredibly frustrating. I'm also still frustrated here, and right now it's not a big deal because there's only 1 marquee, but that we still don't have squads for these characters, right? Especially now that we have 2 different squads going in, I need something here. I need to be able to remember per boss which characters I'm using, because I'm an old man, and we're all busy people and we all have lives, and it's really hard to keep that at the forefront of your brain at all times. Um, Beyond that, there were a couple of bugs that we saw yesterday, and I don't want to talk about all of the bugs. Meathead did release a post. There are a couple of them that I think were handled really well, and a couple of them that are handled not as well, and a couple that shouldn't have happened. The first, the Era image on the web store episode pass. They accidentally had the Era of Andor image up on the episode pass a few days early. I know that several people who did not buy the pass for the anniversary thought that this was a pre-order of the Andor pass, and they were very disappointed. CG has sent out the Andor pass to those players, and I honestly I applaud CG for doing so. They technically probably didn't have to do that. Those players got what I call Christmas morning, because they got all of the rewards of the last episode that we had, as well as this upcoming episode. So it's a nice change for them. The Xeric ability modules did not convert along with the other Era materials. Again, for me, I actually think that this is a very positive thing, and I am going to be able to spend less towards the end of the Era because of it. But it's kind of one of those things that shouldn't have been forgotten. And I honestly believe that it's probably because there are 16 numbered materials in an Era. And this is the 17th upgrade material that does not have a numbering system attached to it. And I think it really does show us just how unnecessary all of these different uh, currencies are, and how frustrating it is for players to have to contend with 17 different currencies, 18 if you count the episode leveling currency as well. And we should count the episode leveling currency as well. Some players were blocked from Claire's Marquee. It's a kind of a silly bug that looks like it is going to be fixed. End of anniversary Era signal data inbox. I got that signal data yesterday, and listen, guys, it was like nothing. And it's kind of bullshit. For somebody who got a high score yesterday and who was expecting 1,000 Era currency, getting, I think it was like 10 or 20 of each signal data was kind of a slap in the face. This is not something we were told about before. And although it is a minor thing, I don't think it was right of CG to do this without letting us know, without communicating this in game and out of game. I understand that there's a bug with this as well, that only players who hit a new high score actually received the signal data. Great. Everybody else, you'll get your signal data in the near future, but it didn't feel good, especially if you're at the top of your Coliseum. And if you, I don't know if people are getting different amounts. So if you're at 500 in Coliseum and getting the same signal data that I was getting, you maybe will win out. If you were expecting 1,000 Era currency, it does not feel great at all. Coliseum leaderboard, that fixes automatically going in with today. 3v3 Omicrons costing 20 mats instead of 10. This one's kind of silly, and it's a little bit frustrating because we are in 3v3 right now, and players who were low on Omicron mats may have wanted to apply those Omicrons to the game. Recent Era units aren't usable in journey guides. It's a small thing. It'll be fixed. Vel's shard art is missing from the episode plus pass on the web store. Again, a small thing. It will be fixed. The big thing that I do want to talk about here is the transition from Era of Anniversaries into the Era of Andor, and just what yesterday felt like, and just how much this cannot happen again. And I'm going to talk about this from my time zone. The Era transition happened at 2 p.m. GAC lock happens at 5 p.m. I was given an entire new episode of characters to play with, and I recognize I have 24 hours to play with those characters as well. And in that time, I had 3 hours to mod 7 characters and get them prepared for GAC. That was not fun to do. And I know that there is a criticism here from some players saying, well, you're fucking stupid if you didn't do this over the last 3 months. No. Players need the opportunity to be able to test their toys and play with their toys and watch their toys and try different mod sets out in Squad Arena and Galactic War or Conquest or whatever else is active in the game to figure out what their best modding is. Giving us 3 hours to guess based off of stats, which sometimes is correct and sometimes isn't correct, was a really, really tough experience. And I happened to get off of work actually early yesterday, which is very rare. So the era happened at 2. I got out of work at 3. I was home by 3:30. It gave me an hour and a half to play with this. My wife was still working at the computer back there, so I was able to quietly sit down and mod. And it basically took me the entire hour and a half. And there are still 2 or 3 characters um, that I'm not convinced by. I shouldn't feel this forced to take such a small amount of time in order to participate in GAC, which is um, CG and Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes basically flagship game mode. It is the reason that a lot of whales whale, and it is the reason that a lot of players play. In that 3-hour time period, I needed to decide which characters I was taking high up, and I am happy to announce that Darth Maul Spiderlegs is my first, not just for fun, Relic 10 character. Um, but I had to contend with upgrading all of these characters past Relic 2. I had to contend with finding mods for them, playing around with those mods, testing those mods, trying these characters out. And I had to contend with TW going on at the same time, while also remembering to re-lock into GAC. And I happen to know of several Kyber 1 players who were online during this period of time, who were modding their characters during this period of time. But because of the stress of getting all of this done at once, they completely forgot to hit that lock button. And they are now basically fucked in GAC because of that short time limit. And we're not talking about the past. And I know that one other point of contention here is that players in the past have said, oh, well, this is the way it's always been. I don't know why these people are the Beatles, but this is the way they've always been. Like, we get our one character and you have 3 hours. That's one character. Being able to mod and test one character in a 3-hour time limit, I still think it's wrong since this is a global game and people do need to sleep. But one character affecting one team is fundamentally not the biggest deal in the world. If Maul came out by himself and you had 3 hours to unlock him, we would have to worry about one team on our GAC defense or on offense if we didn't also remember to lock. We have 7 characters affecting 7 teams. And going into Era of Andor, we have a minimum of 2 full teams. In 3v3, quite possibly 4 to 5 teams that will be affected by these changes, depending on when CG drops the end of that era. And it can feel really, really bad to know that you are behind that much. Players like myself who have been in K2 for a long time and we had to contend with whales getting new toys. Seeing one new thing on defense, not a big deal. Seeing 7 brand new things on defense, that is a huge slap in the face and it is a problematic thing. On top of which, with these datacron changes, and having 7 focused datacrons, players who are not extreme whales are going to struggle. Players who are whales who were not awake during those 3 hours are going to struggle. This spider legs datacron, man, once we hit 5v5, with how difficult it was to kill reliably stranger teams, this thing is going to fuck. and it is going to shut people down. And the way that datacron farming has changed now with 3 months and datacrons not being new during GAC week, but now this datacron set is new during off GAC week, so only the mega whales are going to have access to this, or the people who spend a lot of crystals, especially because there is no dusting. It makes it feel even worse. But going back to the initial point, and that is to say, having to figure out 7 characters in such a short time frame, we have to consider so many different situations. If you're in the US, you probably work during that time. You can sneak away to the bathroom to mod 1 character, to poop. I had to poop, sorry, but you're really modding Stormtrooper Luke. You can't do that for 7 characters. There are people in Europe, it's 10 o'clock at night. You know, they have an obligation during that time. They have to put their kids to bed. There are people in Asia who are literally sleeping, and they should not have to wake up in the middle of the night to mod all of these characters so that they can deal with a whole week's worth of content. A week worth of content. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel fun. It doesn't feel exciting. Players are spending more money, and we're being pressed for time more. And I can understand why people are frustrated there. This is a game that works on 24-hour timers. This is a game that says, hey, we understand that there are time zones for every hour in a day. So we're going to give you 24 hours to do everything. And we are now saying, if you're not within a very particular time zone, if you don't live a very particular life, every 3 months, there is going to be a week where you are going to be getting slapped around because your schedule is not conducive to the schedule that CG has set. And it's a problem. And I've said this before, CG, I don't, especially if the last day of Coliseum is just signal data. Going forward, cut off the Coliseum a day early. Give everybody 10 signal data of whatever it is, because you were doing that anyway, and say, you know what, you have an extra 24 hours to play with your toys and figure them out and deal with them. Or wait until after GAC lock and say, hey, GAC lock just ended. The era is now over. The new era is transitioning now, so that players have a week to play with their toys and figure out their toys and know where they want to use those toys. It's frustrating to see the community the way that it is right now. The more vocal spots in that community, because this is a game that I love, and this is a game that I know that those those people also love. And it is frustrating for them to feel like their wallet is tighter than it has ever been in the past. It is frustrating when I see people who have the money to spend, and they will readily tell you, hey, I do have the money to spend, but I don't want to because I'm not getting anything out of it anymore. I think a solution needs to happen, and I think that changes need to happen. And think honestly, CG, that you need to communicate with us better these changes. The era conversion should have been communicated ahead of time. The signal data on the last day of the era should have been communicated to us ahead of time. Not retroactively, not after the words, not, oh, it's not a big deal, right? We need to find a solution. We need to find a middle ground. I know I've said this in the past. I understand that for newer players, this is a really great change, separating out so that people can work on their legacy roster while also working on a brand new roster. And it makes players who are newer feel a lot more involved. And that is a super positive change for a lot of players. And I recognize that, and I appreciate that. But this layaway system is not working. And CG, I'm going to tell you right now, era PvP is not the way. Era PvP is going to frustrate players more. Era PvP. I know because you've talked about it, right? We saw the post. Era PvP is not going to get people excited. It is going to add to the time crunch. It is going to make those players feel more frustrated than they already are right now. We need to find a way that allows players to play with their toys, test their toys ahead of time. We need to allow players to mod their characters ahead of time. That sandbox mode that people have wanted for years and years and years. This is a great time to add that sandbox mode. A era testing sandbox mode where you can use your current era characters with old characters, and you can put mods on them, and you can save mod sets, and you can test them against other squads to see what's working and what's not working so that you can be better prepared for the end of an era. This is a great time to add that. And it is not a feature that will directly increase revenue, but it is a feature that will allow players to play with their toys, and it may placate them enough to say, you know what, I'm happy enough right now to continue spending. I'm frustrated. I feel like my entire yesterday was wasted. I feel like, and I know that this is not CG's fault that I work a lot, but I feel like it was a big ask on the day that that I was getting home early, and I was excited, and I can do a lot more stuff with my wife that I didn't have to, had to spend a good deal of time sitting around interacting with systems that in the past I've more naturally been able to interact with over a longer period of time, and now have to interact with over a very short period of time. I know, again, multiple content creators reached out to me yesterday, smaller creators who have decided to walk away from the game. I know that Arnold has decided that he's no longer wailing on characters. I know that Scribe put something out that I did not get a chance to watch yet. But clearly, CG, the community, I don't think the community is being unfair. The community is reaching out. The community is calling out. The community is saying, hey, this is what we need right now. This is who we are right now. This is how we feel right now. The community is expressing that they want to give a company their money, but they do not feel like they are in a position where giving that company their money is doing them any benefit. And if I have any advice to players in the community who are listening to this, I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money. Spend if you're happy, don't spend if you're not happy. But any advice, it is to keep talking about this, to keep bringing the topics up, to keep expressing discontent in a meaningful and civil and reasonable manner. Keep discussing it and talking about it, and continue to talk about solutions, and continue to isolate why things feel bad for you and how you believe they could reasonably be changed while still allowing space for a space to be a business, for a business to be a business. Continue to talk about it. Don't stop talking in 3 days. Don't stop talking in 5 days. Don't just jump off the cliff and quit. Continue talking about it. Continue bringing it up. Because what tends to happen is that we talk about things for 3 days and it goes the way of the dodo. I said on Zeta Protocol last week, in the previous iteration of eras, I was at about like a 2 or 3. I was really hoping to be at a 7 with this era. Normally, the second update of something really fundamentally changes it in very positive ways, in my experience over the years. Right now, I'm at like a 4.5. Slightly improved over Era of Anniversaries, but not enough to where I don't feel disappointed with the fact that it is not enough. One other thing that I want to finish off with here is I think that the game right now doesn't really understand its own identity. And if we think about it, 2 years ago, CG started a system with the Gungans. And then at the beginning of last year, they changed the system again. And then at the end of last year, they changed the system again. A good portion of your players are in their 30s to 50s, if my YouTube and Twitch demographics are of any indication. We don't like to learn things and then have to learn them again and then have to learn them a third time and then have to learn them on top of that. The trajectory of the game right now reminds me of one of my favorite games, Star Wars Galaxies, ironically, which was a beautiful sandbox MMO. I played on Tarkinus, for those of you who remember it. And it was very successful until World of Warcraft came out. And when World of Warcraft came out, the game, or before really World of Warcraft came out, the game didn't really know what it was. And we saw a combat update, and we saw a new game engine, and then we saw Trials of Obi-Wan shift the entire game to a completely different dynamic, and it left the player base very confused until the player base finally did end up leaving. And that's kind of what this feels like now, is when we're not making changes to a system to improve the system, but now we have 1, 2, 3 times in 2 years completely changed the system. And not only is it not okay, but it's frustrating that it is not communicated to us in a clear and concise manner. I will leave this last piece for CG. CG, I've proven myself in the past. I've been very helpful in the past. You have seen my posts. You have seen what happens. You have seen my willingness to try and make this game better. Not less expensive, better. Please, work with me here and work with some of the smarter people in the community here. I promise you, send me your posts in advance. I will ask you the questions that need to be asked so that when they are prepared in the future to be given to the community, you already have the answers to the questions, and the questions don't need to be asked. With all of that said, as I have 4 minutes to get to work, peace out, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and I really hope that you see a significant era turnaround in the next couple of days.